Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Faculty of Law, General Sir John Kotelawala Defence University, I warmly welcome all distinguished guests, paper presenters, and participants to the final session of the 13th International Research Conference of KDU. You are currently joining us for the technical session themed The Role of Law in Pursuit of Justice. As you must already be aware, owing to the ongoing pandemic situation in the country, this year's conference is conducted primarily on a virtual platform. The afternoon session will be chaired by President's Counsel, retired Rear Admiral Shavindra Fernando, about whom it is my honor to relate a brief introduction. Retired Rear Admiral Shavindra Fernando, President's Counsel, holds a Master of Laws in Public International Law from the University of Colombo and a Master of Laws in Corporate and Commercial Law from King's College, University of London. He is currently in active practice as a President's Counsel, practicing in both the Superior Courts and Courts of First Instance in the areas of criminal, civil, corporate, and public law. He also appears before other judicial tribunals for state and non-state entities. He has held many prestigious positions, both at international and domestic levels, including the post of Additional Solicitor General of the Attorney General's Department of Sri Lanka, Justice of Appeal at the Court of Appeal of the Republic of Fiji, Senior State Counsel at the Attorney General's Department of the Republic of Seychelles, and Legal Advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sri Lanka. He has also been awarded the North Humanitarian Operation Medal and East Humanitarian Operation Medal for his service rendered to the Sri Lanka Navy as Judge Advocate General and Director General, Legal Services. I now cordially invite the Chairman to commence the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It will be my pleasure to chair this session, and there are 4 presentations. The first presentation will be on national security and freedom of expression in Sri Lanka, and will be co-authored by A.N. Bobagama and P.P. Algama. Arunoda Bobagamage is an officer of the Sri Lanka Administrative Service and the Assistant Divisional Secretary Colombo. She was previously attached to the Finance Ministry and the Ministry of Public Administration as an Assistant Director. She holds a BSc in Management Information Systems from the University College Dublin, Ireland, and an LLB from the Open University of Sri Lanka. Is currently reading for a Masters of International Relations at the University of Colombo. Pranidhi P. Algama Bobagamage is an officer of the Sri Lanka Administrative Service. She is also an Assistant Secretary Parliamentary Affairs, HR and IT of the Ministry of Industries and Supply Chain Management. Previously, she has served as the Assistant Director, Operations and Statutory Boards of the same ministry. She holds a Masters of Arts in International Relations from Colombo University and a BSc Physical Science degree from the University of Sri Lanka. She is currently reading for a Masters of Economics at the University of Colombo and also reading for her LLB at the Open University of Colombo. May I now invite the 2 presenters on the title National Security and Freedom of Expression in Sri Lanka. Friends or foes? Over to you.
trying to share. Is it visible to you, sir, now?
Yes, you're clear.
My presentation is also visible.
The heading is on the screen. Paper ID 668.
Yes. Shall I start now?
Please do.
Thank you so much, the kind introduction. I will be presenting our paper titled National Security and Freedom of Expression in Sri Lanka, Trends of Force. Now, as we all know, freedom of expression is a cornerstone of democracy. Article 19.2 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights provides the international norm on this. Sri Lanka, a signatory to the ICCPR, has incorporated the same in Article 14.1a of its Second Republican Constitution. For the purpose of the study, we define freedom of expression as the ability to freely express oneself without being subjected to retaliation, interference, partial or complete censorship, or legal sanction. Now, however, this right is not an absolute right. That is, it can be derogated from on fair grounds in the interest of national security. When we are discussing the case of Sri Lanka, we have to keep in mind that Sri Lanka has faced 3 bouts of organized violence post-enactment of its 1978 constitution, which endangered its national security. Therefore, our research problem is whether restrictions of freedom of expression in the interest of national security in Sri Lanka were within international standards. Our objectives are to define the level of freedom of expression, to survey legislation enacting such restrictions, and to explore related judicial reviews. For this purpose, we employ the methodology of political analysis using secondary sources as displayed on the screen. Our theoretical framework is given here. As we rationalize, the legitimacy of a state is measured by the implementation and protection of natural rights of its nationals. And on the basis of factors in servanda or the principles of cooperation based on honorary agreements, Sri Lanka, a signatory to the ICCPR, is obliged to or bound to respect, protect and fulfill the freedom of expression. However, national security is a top priority of any state. That's why, as I mentioned earlier, the freedom of expression can be limited on the ground of national security. But Constitution is the document that codifies the long-term plan, the design and the dream of any nation. But on most occasions, we see that constitutionalism and other parliamentary enactments are in conflict. Now, this tension is even more apparent when the judiciary is in favor of the constitution or other parliamentary enacted laws. However, law is the creation of the judiciary because it only assumes substance, allowing interpretation and elucidation with respect to socio-economic circumstances as appropriate by the judiciary. In keeping this theoretical framework in our mind, let us move on to the discussion. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in fact, the scope of freedom of expression in Sri Lanka is a creature and creation of the judiciary because, according to the Constitution, freedom of speech and expression, including publication, are what is protected for Sri Lankan citizens. But the judicial review has made it so that all forms of expression, even non-verbal, right to a vote, liberty of the public to hear and read, and also the right to access to information before the 19th Amendment, were incorporated within the scope of this Article 14.1a by the judiciary. Now, when we discuss the restrictions on freedom of expression in Sri Lanka on the grounds of national security, we do it in 3 segments. The first being 1978 Constitution and International History. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is internationally accepted that freedom of expression can be limited. But it can only be limited as prescribed by law according to Article 57 of our Constitution as restriction cannot be waived arbitrarily and cannot be used to prevent merely a local or relatively isolated threat to law and order. Further, according to judicial review, the Joseph Pereira versus Attorney General case, even the President cannot restrict fundamental rights, including the freedom of expression, beyond what is constitutionally provided. Keeping this in mind, we are moving on to take a look at the major parliamentary acts that provide for restriction of freedom of expression in Sri Lanka. Now, earlier we had 3 such pieces of legislation, one with LTE and other similar organizations Act repeal. Now we have only 2. Of them, the most important is Public Security Ordinance. According to the Public Security Ordinance, the President is empowered to proclaim a state of emergency and declare under the Public Security Ordinance emergency regulations in the interest of public security. However, by the same Act, it is provided that Parliament may revoke or amend a regulation through a resolution of Parliament. But in the history of Sri Lanka, no Parliament so far has used this authority vested in it. And also the judiciary is not empowered to inquire any such proclamation as provided by the Constitution. So in such a background, the only way that is left for judicial review is Article 126 of the Constitution, which provides that a citizen can come before the Supreme Court of the country and allege that his or her fundamental rights, including the freedom of expression, has been infringed or in the danger of imminent infringement. So the case that we discussed here were all produced in such instances. Now, when we take a look at such judicial review, the necessity of emergency regulations being constitutionally valid was accepted by Joseph Pereira versus Attorney General case. However, almost all the cases before that and even after this case recognizes the entitlement of the state to limit freedom of expression and also observes that the judiciary must abstain from any interference therein because the circumstances at the time which make sure that the national security of the country is being jeopardized should be considered when considering such cases. However, international standards provide that according to Article 4 of the ICCPR to restrict the freedom of expression, a situation must genuinely threaten the life of the nation, and also that the state must have officially proclaimed the state of emergency. Without these 2, according to the international standard, it's not possible for a state to enact any restrictions on the freedom of expression of its citizens. When we consider the international standards such as the ICCPR, the Sefta principles and the Johannesburg principles, restriction of freedom of expression is only possible once 2 tests are passed. That is the test of necessity and the test of proportionality. The test of necessity is provided for in the Article 93 of the ICCPR. However, sadly, it is not recognized in the 1978 Constitution. The principle of necessity provides that a state must provide careful justification not only for their decision to proclaim a state of emergency, but also for any specific measures based on such proclamation, including restriction of fundamental freedoms. On the other hand, principle of proportionality provides that any restriction on the freedom of expression must be proportional to the injury to the national security. However, as we observe in the ACTA case, where the court observed that only some part of the material to be printed was injurious to the national security, the complete press was closed down and the publication was banned, and the court upheld in such decision of the competent authority, the principle of proportionality is not clearly recognized by the Sri Lankan legislation or even the judiciary. So in such a background, we observe in conclusion that freedom limitation in Sri Lanka is really a creation and creature of the judicial review, and that it is not limited to speech because of judicial review request. And that majority of limitations on freedom of expression occurred as emergency regulations under the Public Utility Ordinance. And that court has mostly upheld such restrictions in deference to the government's authority to and the empowerment to impose such restrictions. And that tests of proportionality and necessity were not applied and not recognized in judicial review in Sri Lanka. However, it should be understood that the vicious and well-organized nature of the LTTE and having to counter organized violence from simultaneously. The second JVP insurrection at the LTT at one time prompted such stern action on the side of the government as well as the judiciary. However, the final conclusion is that most restrictions on freedom of expression do not satisfy international standards as it is, and that conveniently available such limitations and the judiciary being deferential to such actions of the government curb the urge for more democratic means of redressing the root causes for such insecurities on the life of the nation. Thank you. As you can see, these are the list of the cases we have used for this study and get started. We would like to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Now I open the floor for questions. There is a question to you from Dr. Rodrigo.
Pranidhi, your paper is very interesting, thought-provoking. But I must tell you that unlimited, unrestricted grant of freedom of speech, freedom of expression is also dangerous because it must lead to abuse of that freedom and infringe the rights of others as well. Now, for example, if you take social media, you will agree with me how some unscrupulous people use their freedom of expression to damage the reputation of people without any unfounded allegations and things of that sort. So therefore there should be some restrictions in place. In fact, there are restrictions under Article 15 of the Constitution. I think our Constitution, the chapter on fundamental rights, has been drafted very carefully. Now, for example, the freedom of thought is an entrenched provision. There's no harm in it because any person can think of anything. He is entitled to have his own freedom of thought. But expression affects the other people's reputation as well. So therefore, it should be carefully monitored. I hope you agree with me. And I think that is what the judiciary also has done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, go ahead.
Should I answer, sir?
Yes, please. If you have any comments or it was more comment than a question. But if you like to give your comments to the comments of Dr. Rodrigo, please do so.
Thank you so much, sir. We also believe in the same. But the only thing being that very much recognized and respected authors such as Jayapati Vikramanayaka and Dr. Lakshman Sinha has observed in their writings that however these emergency regulations have sometimes gone beyond what Article 15.7, the writers of the Article 15.7 had been their restrictions were not so readily available, maybe the state might have paid even more attention to the root causes. We really agree with you that freedom of expression should not be completely uninhibited, but kind of these readily available restrictions to the government might also be a bit injurious. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I also add a few words to what I said earlier? Now, even prior to the enactment of the 1978 Constitution, the common law had, remedies for this. Now, for example, the law of Neely, under the Aquilian Action, we had the concept of qualified privilege. For in the case of for media, for example, there is privilege, qualified privilege, but it's not absolute privilege. Absolute privilege is given to parliamentary proceedings and court proceedings. But under the qualified privilege available under the common law, Roman Dutch law, the privilege is available only if only the absence of malice. Right? So therefore, malicious expressions are not protected by privilege. So that sort of thing should be there. I think in your paper also, if you, if you write on that aspect as well, I think it would improve the quality of your paper.
Yes, absolutely, sir. Thank you, sir.
I think we will move on to the next speaker, but before that, if I may just add a comment, I think in Vic Tiger's case, it was Justice Mark Fernand who said that the freedom of expression doesn't mean that a person is entitled to call out fire in a crowded theatre. So I think both Dr. Rodrigo and you are on the same wavelength, that both agree that it cannot be unrestricted, but I think what you are stating is that it should be closer to the international norms under the ICCPR and UDHR, and you think that, of the view that some of the restrictions, especially by the Public Security Ordinance, go beyond that. Anyway, thank you very much for your presentation and the time taken to answer questions and giving your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I will now go on to the second speaker, that is Geethani Jeevanthi. A short introduction. Ms. Geethani Jeevanthi obtained a LLB and LLM degrees from the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo, and is currently serving as a lecturer at the Department of Legal Studies.
Good afternoon to all of you.
1 minute, I'm still giving an introduction of you. If you can hold on for just 1 minute, we will hear your presentation. Open University of Colombo, she has also completed a postgraduate diploma in criminology and criminal justice offered by the University of Jayawardhanapura. Currently, she is reading for her MPhil PhD at the Faculty of Graduate Studies, University of Colombo. Her topic for this afternoon will be regulating food advertisements in Sri Lanka and curbing childhood obesity, the way forward. Over to you, Geethani. Hello? Geethani, can you hear me? Can you come online?
Good afternoon to all of you. I'm Geethani Jeevanthi and I'm going to present my research paper now. topic of my presentation is the regulated food advertisement in Sri Lanka and curbing the child obesity, the way forward. This is the outline of my presentation, and when it comes to the background of the study, I am going to discuss about the obesity, and especially I am focusing about the childhood obesity and the relationship between the food advertisement and the childhood obesity, and also finally the regulation taking place and the regulation which handled in this area. So what is obesity? Obesity, is it a problem? Yes, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization statistics, they have proved that obesity has tripled since 1975 worldwide, and it is noted that most of the world population dies due to the overweight and obesity than due to underweight. This figure is quite similarly applicable to children across the world, and it was reported that 38 million children below the age of 5 were obese or overweight in 2019. Actually, these figures are earlier linked with the developed country, but now there is a shift of the pattern, and even in the African region and Asian region, we can find cases of obesity in children. So, what is this trend in Sri Lanka? Yes, we know that being underweight is also a problem of Sri Lanka, but in the recent past, we see the obesity. Being obese in the childhood is also a problem in the Sri Lankan context, and I have pointed out some of the studies done by the researchers. They have proved that the obesity among the children has been increased in the recent past. So why is being obese, is it a problem? Yes, it is, because there are physical consequences, psychological consequences, and also economic consequences. In physical wise, the more than 75 obese children will become obese adults. And also, even if their body mass index or the BMI is controlled later in life, they have increased the risk of non-communicable diseases. And being childhood obesity is a vicious cycle. You can see there are so many consequences. And also, as pointed out by these researchers, those who were obese at a very young age at a higher risk of being associated with chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, cancer, heart disease, reproductive disorders like liver disease. So, it is a problem. So, psychological wise also, at school level, bullying, peer rejection, lack of friends, and later even in the job opportunities and lack of compassion is a problem. And economically, we know it's a very big problem. So therefore, addressing weight gain during childhood is an important priority for countries, because doing so reduces the growing burden that obesity imposed on the healthcare system, on employer and the economy, and the affected individuals and their families. So it is very much important. So now we are going to see the link between, is there a positive relationship between the obesity and the food advertisement. We know that taking high intake of calories than required level will lead to obesity, and therefore the selection of food that the child eats determines the BMI level of the child. So it is essential to see whether there is a positive relationship between the bad advertisement of the food and the selection of food. So media is a powerful tool which leading to changing the idea and the perception of individual. The advertisement have the power to change the ideology of people, the mind compelling them to buy unnecessary things. Especially the researchers have found that children tend to believe what is shown on TV. Another concern is that children are particularly vulnerable to advertising, with children under the age of 7 years generally unable to distinguish between editorial and promotional content, and most children developing a critical understanding of advertising around the age of 12. So we know there is a problem. So I have gone through the many of the writers' findings, not only the foreign writers, even in the Sri Lanka, even in the Fernando 2019 and 2015. Both these researchers, they have identified the relationship between, whether there is a positive relationship between the time the child spent on the TV, before the TV, and the obesity. Yes, they have proved that all these researchers have found that there is a positive relationship. So we know that now there is a problem. So I have proved that there is a problem in Sri Lanka context. So I'm going to see what is the legal remedies that we can solve for this, and also how does our legal system respond to this need. So under that, the main research objectives is to identify the level of state party obligation to address this issue, and to critically understand the existing law implemented in Sri Lanka on this issue, to identify the good practices of other countries related to this issue, and see how far we can adapt those in Sri Lanka. This is a qualitative methodology, and the selecting of qualitative approach could be justified as it allows the author to provide a complex textual description of the different things writing on the subject matter. So let's move to the discussion that is a major part of this research. When it comes to the convention or the state obligation, we can see the Child Rights Convention is a major convention working related to children, and under that the parents or guardian have the primary obligation and not, but also the duty of the state to assist and provide facilities of service also we cannot forget. But especially the Article 24 of the CRC is very much important. It focuses about the right to health of the children. So it says the state party shall pursue the full implementation of this right, and it says the adequacy of nutrition of food is a major, should be a major concern of the state party. Apart from the CRC, actually the CESR, International Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, also they recognize the right to food, and that is not, even though it is not specifically focused on the child, that is quite applicable to each and every human being. So the states are under an obligation. When let's discuss more about the word adequate of nutrition food. General Comment 15, which is specifically focused on the interpretation of Article 24, it is mentioned what is meant by the adequate nutrition. It says the state should also address obesity of children as it is associated with hypertension and so many issues. So it says the marketing of these substances, especially when such marketing is focusing on children, should be regulated. So they pose a responsibility to the state parties. So even in that responsibility further going on addressing the private sector, also saying all business enterprises have an obligation of due diligence with respect to human rights, which include all rights enshrined under the convention. Among other responsibilities in all the contexts, and it says health assembly resolution limit advertisement of energy-dense non-home food and drink containing high level of caffeine or other substance potentially harmful to children should be regulated. So there is a special rapporteur on the right to health and the right to food. So he also pointed out that in his report he says states have a positive duty under their duty to protect, to regulate advertising of unhealthy foods, because there is a relationship between the childhood obesity and the advertisement. So WHO also in 2010 issued some recommendations saying the marketing of food and non-alcoholic beverage to children that invite all member states to initiate policy measures to call on member states to decrease children exposed to unhealthy food marketing. So what is that is the part of the international level. They have the state parties are under an obligation to fulfill this obligation. So what is the context in Sri Lanka? So Sri Lanka, actually we have the right to food act is the main act related to this issue. Actually to tell you in the initial level, there is no such regulation in Sri Lanka addressing this issue. Only we have we have to find some sort of here and there some of the places where they touch this area, but there is no proper legal framework to address this issue. The Food Act also says no person shall label, package, treat, process, sell or advertise any food in manner that is false, misleading, deceptive or likely to create an erroneous impression regarding its character, value, quality, composition or merit or safety. So then if that under that part also we can go to certain extent. Whereas standard prescribed for any food, no person shall label, package, sell or advertise any food which does not conform to the standard in such a manner as like to be mistaken for the food for which the standard has been prescribed. There are certain notifications. One is specifically focused about the color coding for sugar level, and that is the food sweeteners regulation. Even in the food sweetener regulation, it is also mentioned that even though some sweeteners are permitted, so aspartame is sometimes a permitted sweetener, but it has clearly said that it is not good for the children, and the word not recommended for children should be printed in clearly legible letter. But I don't know how far this is practiced in the Sri Lankan context. The Consumer Affairs Authority also have some certain regulation, not particularly about the advertisement or anything, but they have certain regulation focuses on specific issues such as advertising of infant milk powder below the age of 1 is totally banned. And for the Direction Number 7 issued in 2007 required every advertisement in respect of the sale of any article published in the media to mention the retail price of such an article. It is only the requirement is to display the price. And this, actually when it comes down to the advertisement, I already told you there is no such proper legal framework to address this issue, but we have the Sri Lanka Corporation Code of Advertisement standard that is a like kind of an ethical code, not a legal binding thing. It says no product or service may be advertised and no method of advertising may be used in association with program intended for children or which large number of children are likely to see, which might result in harm to them physically, mentally or morally, and no method of advertising may be employed which takes advantage of the natural credibility and sense of the knowledge of children. So that is actually not focusing about the unhealthy food advertisement, that is covering the using of children for advertisement and so many things. So that is to say that we are not even focusing the problem. However, this does not have any legal enforceability. So let's see what are the practices of the other countries. I'm going to take some examples from other countries. In Turkey, they have a certain regulation. Actually, they have taken food profile module and prepared foods and beverage list from the Ministry of Health. They have classified all the advertisement into 3 categories by allocating red, orange and green colors. Actually, red category was determined as the food inert and beverage that are not allowed to be advertised during the childhood. An orange category as foods, the beverage allowed to be advertised in the specific criteria such as like nuts, bread, cereal, crackers, corn. The green category, the fresh fruit, vegetable, meat, fish and those kind of things and beverage allowed to be advertised. So in Sweden also they have banned of radio or television commercial advertising which targets below age of 12. In 2013 all companies came to agree with self-regulation. Belgium also they have the law, in Chile also the promotional and advertisement targeted children below 14 years old for high fat sugar foods is limited on media. In Quebec, Mexico, UK, there are plenty of examples they have regulated this thing. So what is the conclusion and recommendation? Even though international regime suggests an obligation that should be fulfilled by the state party, it cannot be seen that the responsibility will be done in equal manner in every year. One of the major reasons for that is the failure can be identified at the level of enforceability of such international recommendation. Because general comments issued at the convention are not legal binding thing. And also I told you guys, even though I see ESCR provides some protection for the right to food, but it is again, it is not the legal responsibilities be different according to Article 2 of the ICESCR because it says only to take action in progressive for realization. And the recommendation made by the WHO also, they are just recommendations. And under that actually it is apparent that even though Sri Lanka has taken some small effort to regulate advertising, it is not sufficiently effective to address the bottom line of the problem because it is like advertising, even though they handle that advertising handling, that is only about that point corporation thing. Other than that, they don't have the Sri Lanka doesn't have a framework to address this particular issue. And even though there are regulations about the food standardizing, banning of certain chemicals, listing out the food chemicals that could be added to food, the awareness of the public is also less, and details of the regulation are not displayed in advertisement. For example, it is compulsory to measure the level of sugar content at the relevant postcode in the label or an artificial drink. However, showing that in an advertisement, it is not necessary. It is only the price. But if we can have a law like for advertising and just to show that that color coding, so then even the child can understand. The child cannot understand he cannot understand the text, but he can still identify the colors. So finally, it can be concluded that Sri Lanka can learn many lessons from the jurisdiction to regulate advertising targeted on children. In this context, the government as a main or the most capable body implementing rules and regulations should come front and take the initiative of drafting new rules and regulations. It is also the duty of the private commercial sector to take prompt action to enable self-regulation, aiming of cultivating healthy food habits among the children rather than profit. These are the references I have used for my study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jivanti. Unfortunately, I can't open the house for questions because Jivanti is not online. This was a recorded presentation that was played. So I will move on straight away to the next presenter, RPV Pathirana, who will be speaking on the title Definitional and Interpretational Approach towards Economic Development on the World Income under Current Laws of Income Tax. A comparison of Sri Lanka and India. Dr. Darshika Pathirana is a senior lecturer, Department of successfully completed the Doctor of Philosophy (PhD) in Law at the National Law School of India, University Bangalore in 2019, a Masters of Law in 2008, in 2008 and Bachelor of Laws with second class honors upper division in 2006. Her research experience is mainly based on tax law and commercial law subjects as she is attached to the Department of Commercial Law. I now invite Dr. Damshika Pathirana to present her speech.
Thank you very much, sir. Good evening to you all. Today I am presenting my research paper, which is on the definitional and interpretational approach towards economic development on the word income and the current laws of income tax. There is a comparison of Sri Lanka and India. So, in any legal context, definition lays the foundation of applicability and decides its scope. So, the judiciary through its interpretation has undertaken subsequent development. Therefore, my research paper looks at the discharge or of income tax as a major income of the country and in fact to the economic development through the lens of interpretation. The primary aim of my research is to take out the conceptual framework within the parameters of its definition. The paper advances the argument that Sri Lanka should establish an inclusive taxpayer-friendly approach definition to effectively address many issues relating to income tax. The paper addresses two sub-research questions. Firstly, how have both jurisdictions defined concepts through country legislation and case law directives? Secondly, the alterations that need to be interpreted in income tax law within these definitional and interpretational spheres. With regard to the common law jurisdictions, both Sri Lanka and India are based on common law principles. So therefore, it is necessary to examine the gradual development of the legislation. The term income in English is based on common law jurisdiction developed by judges' interpretation. As example, London County Council versus Attorney General, Lord McNaughton has emphasized that income tax, if I may be pardoned for saying so, is a tax on income. Therefore, if an item of money is not income within the meaning of that tax, it is not subject under the IRA in a normal way. Therefore, income tax is a tax on income and not a tax on anything else. The second illustration, God versus Demo, Justice Fairman stated that the word income is of such elusive import that it cannot be defined in precise terms which would adequately meet legislative requirements. Arguably, the judge did not want to restrict the definition and he kept it as open to include what either scope. Therefore, it is observed that there is indeed no concise and complete form of expression which would adequately serve for taxation purposes. Further, judicial interpretations emerging from tax cases has unanimously pointed out that the term income is used in the taxation categories in its ordinary sense, except where it expressly extends or restricts that sense. In taxation, unlike in economics, the definition of income is not a term of art in the context of taxation. I can give you some further illustrations. Tennant versus Mead, Age of British Columbia versus Austin, Vanderbilt Limited versus Clark, Aiken versus McCombie. All decided cases suggested that one must go in search of life while some cases found to turn upon his own time. On that point, with no elaborate criteria emerged, even so the decisions are useful as illustrations. So, the concept of income is a very wide and vague term which has been covered in all other subjects of income tax law alone. So now I like to move to the Sri Lankan context and the Indian context. With regard to the Sri Lankan context, accordingly the interpretation section 217 of the 2006 Inland Revenue Act, which was the earlier act of Sri Lanka, provides a definition to the term income as profits on income. That's all. Similarly, the 2017 Act, which is the current Act, number 24, 2017 Inland Revenue Act, does not present a proper definition under the interpretation section, but enumerates sources under section 5 to section 8. So, it is significant to identify that section 3 of the 2006 Act and sections 5 to 8 of the 2017 Act stipulated source-based approach income chargeable to tax. The sources of income include in the above mentioned sections of the both Sri Lankan 2006 Act and 2017 Act. They are only the income from any of these sources that can be charged to income tax. Further, the above sections do not protect defined income but have stated the characteristics of each source. And the lists are not exclusively that provided precise answer concept of income in this regard. However, both the acts do not provide a wide and a precise definition of income. When we look back into the Indian context, in 1939, the Indian Income Tax Act defined the word income under the section 6C of section 2 of the 1922 Act for the first time. Later, the Finance Act 1955 substituted the definition and its scope expanded. The current Indian Income Tax Act 1961 broadened the scope of this definition and developed the idea of the concept. According to the definition of income, it starts with the word includes. Therefore, the list is considered as an inclusive list. The restriction of this principle in Indian law is illustrated by the section 224. It merely enumerates certain items, some of which cannot ordinarily be considered as income but are statutorily to be treated as such. The expression of income does not, in the context of Income Tax Act 1961, mean on the realization of monetary benefits. Therefore, the definition of income under the above section of Indian Act being an inclusive definition, the meaning of the word income is undoubtedly very wide. So I would like to explore the concept under the case law jurisprudence. It is very important to consider the statutory interpretations for the explanation as to follow the guidelines for Sri Lankan context. It is well established that under the Indian law, the concept of income is an inclusive definition and not an exhaustive definition. It is important first through case interpretation why it should be exhaustive. With regard to the Sri Lankan case law, the Supreme Court case of County versus Commissioner of Income Tax and Chief Propaganda Board case, the question was to answer whether the contribution made by the government to the funds of the board was accessible to tax as profits of business. The decision of the court was that the contribution by the government was a receipt of income of the board but not a profit of business. Comparatively, number of cases in Indian law illustrates the phenomenon of interpreting the word income. The Supreme Court in CIT was trial. The court held that the use of the inclusive definition is not to restrict the meaning, only to widen its network. The case emphasized that this court has repeatedly said that the word income is of widest amplitude and that it must be given its natural and grammatical meaning. Hence, it partakes of the nature of income and the several clauses therein are not exhaustive of the meaning of income. In Navichandra Mahatla versus CIT, under the relevant observations of learned judges, deciding the case clearly indicates that such wide dealing was put upon the word income not because of any particular legislative practice, either in the United States or in Commonwealth countries, but because such was the normal concept of an connotation of the ordinarily used word income. Its natural meaning embraces any profit or gain which is actually received. In another decided case, the court held that the full scope of the expression should not be limited to the technical concept of income in contradiction to capital as understood in the income tax act. It is important to highlight that all receipts are not assessable to tax. The income tax authorities cannot assess all receipts. They can assess only those receipts that amount to income. Therefore, before they assess a receipt, they must find that to be income. They cannot find so unless they have some material to justify their findings. This confusion could result in vagueness and can have different meanings and interpretations at different times. Since the term income is not defined in that, one has to rely on its ordinary meaning as used in society and render it accordingly. Yet, in keeping this confusion in mind, one should realize that this definition in the Act and dictionaries is adequate to recognize the term income. Therefore, it is not worthy to follow the interpretation and case law from India for determining the different aspects. The reason perhaps is to avoid any future litigation over whether these items are income or not. That apart, the courts have liberally construed the concept of income and always followed this thumb rule. If anyone has earned it, it is income. Be assured that whatever comes into hand because of the speed of your braw or the application of your multifarious talents, it is going to be considered as income. A number of cases illustrate the phenomenon of interpreting of the concept of income within the income definition. It is very clearly understood that the word income is very difficult to define than other concepts after researching number of cases. Thus, there is no doubt that the existence of the concept is an essential requirement and that this requirement has been received in the Indian jurisdiction. It might still be income if it partakes of the nature of income. Income is not restricted to the classes of receipts mentioned in the definition, but also
Dr. Can I interrupt you? You're run out of time, so if you can kindly move to the conclusion, will be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So finally, the research identified that the Indian Income Tax Act attempts to provide an inclusive definition under the section 224. So with regard to the cases decided on the Indian Income Tax Law, the word income has given it ordinarily, natural and grammatical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Can I open the floor for questions? Are there any questions for Dr. Danshika Patil?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
let me start my presentation. Actually, the conference broad theme today is a holistic approach towards national growth and the national security. In this broad theme, my topic will be based on the participatory approach of local government institutions in Sri Lanka. Therefore, I believe that my study will immensely contribute to grow the democratic characteristics of local government institutions in Sri Lanka. With that aim, let me briefly discuss about the background of my research. Looking at the evolution of the local government, it has a long history. However, as a result of the colonialism, the British changed the traditional system of local administration without considering the characteristics of the home-drawn system of it. And we were granted the independence in 1948. Even after the independence, the country continues to live with the colonial heritage of an imposed local government system. The idea of reforming the current local government regime has been on the political and policy agendas of the Sri Lankan government since independence. For example, the Chokshi Commission, the Morabada Committee, the Presidential Commission on Reforms of Local Government, and the National Policy on Local Government in 2009 can be cited as important policy initiatives. Nevertheless, the potential of a multi-level system of the governance to empower the people and the nation is yet to be realized. In this background, the objective of this research is to provide a conceptual basis for institutionalizing citizen participation in the local government system under the existing constitutional structure. Even though I'm looking at the conceptual basis here, I'm looking to existing legal framework and how we need to incorporate participatory methods into our local government system. With that, here I have selected two research questions to address in this paper. First one is how decentralization facilitates the promotion of citizen participation. Here I have identified the concept of decentralization as a tool of facilitation to ensure effective local government system. Is significant in the context of local government. When answering these two questions, I advance the argument that due to weaknesses of the existing representative democratic system, the necessities of local communities have not been represented, and therefore there is a requisite for an alternative mechanism through which entire local communities can be participated and represent their needs. The bottom-up approach of decentralization facilitates the creation of such a mechanism. The methodology used in this research includes a literature review and comparative legal research. In the discussion, I want to highlight certain factors and need to explain a little bit about the concept of participatory democracy. If we are looking at the simple meaning of participatory democracy, it enables the general public, all the people, can participate in the decision-making process of local government institutions. If you are looking at the scholarly opinions with regard to this concept, the recent discourse of people-centered development underlines the assumption that people should be the architects of their own future. And similar to some of argue that the role of social capital capabilities, freedom and the ability of ordinary people to manage development themselves should be focused in this discussion. Therefore, if we have a legislative forum or the legislative space to obtain engage in the decision-making process of development and planning with regard to local government institutions. According to Gaventa, who is a leading scholar in this field, he has expressed his view, a first key challenge for the 21st century is the construction of new relationships between ordinary people and the institutions, especially those government which affect their lives. With that conceptual background, let me move into how this participatory democracy, how this concept has implemented in action. Here I have selected three methods. Actually, apart from these three methods, there three. One is the participatory planning, the second one is participatory budgeting, and the third one is made public. When it comes to participatory planning, in India, the state of Kerala, the state has put forth the prominent example of the People's Plan campaign, and that offered a proactive methodology for decentralized planning with direct participation by citizens. Apart from India, many other countries including South Africa, Guyana, Uganda, and Tanzania are some of the countries which experiencing community-based plan. The participatory budgeting in Brazil, Porto Alegre adopted a very system, and that system was followed by other European countries as well. The meaning of this are one of the mechanisms providing an opportunity for citizens to deal with public issues. Let me look at the relationship between decentralization and local government. Here I have supported with scholarly opinions, but I'm not going to discuss in detail. But here what I have find out, the decentralization has identified as a facilitator for ensuring effective local governance. With that, I'm moving the status of local government. I want to emphasize that in the Constitution, so far, the Constitution does not recognize the local government institution as a third tier of government. With the 13th Amendment, with the introduction of 13th Amendment, provincial councils were established, but still the local government institutions are governing under three separate legislations. Here I have mentioned those three legislations: Municipal Council Ordinance, Urban Council Ordinance, and Pradesh Sabha Act. After the establishment of provincial councils, now local government has become. After that, I attempted to identify, even though it is limited, what are the legal spaces for the citizen participation in local government in Sri Lanka. It was found that there's no any structured or systematic way to obtain the citizen participation in the decision-making process of local government. However, I could be able to find out certain provisions with regard to this, the standing committees in municipal councils and the committees in Pradesh Sabhas and urban councils. If you are looking at the legal status of these committees, it has been set out in section 26 to 29 of the Municipal Councils Ordinance and section 29 of the Urban However, if you are looking at the difference between these committees, even though the standing committees have a mandatory nature of establishment, we cannot see that kind of nature with regard to the committees in urban councils and Pradesh Sabhas. Those are implementing as advisory level. Therefore, the principal legislation and local government institutions do not promote citizen participation in a structured manner rather than providing a mere provision. These are some of the other recent initiatives with regard reform, National Policy on Local Government, the Amendment Act 2, especially with regard to the election process and the National Committee for Delimitation. But these reforms are also not directly linked with the promoting citizen participation in the decision-making process of local government institution. So, with regard to if I looked at the existing legal scenario, I would be able to identify certain drawbacks. The lack of proper constitutional recognition, as I have mentioned earlier, and why still we are depending upon the colonial legislation, and very few times those legislation was amended. So therefore, we need to amend and update these legislation to meet the present social needs and requirements. And it was noticed that excluded certain communities, including indigenous community. Yes, it's a very small population if you are looking at the Banda community, but there's no representation. And the absence of legal space for taking the third party needs and in society. Yes, quickly looking at the UK, the Local Government Act in 2000 and Localism Act in 2011 can be identified as progressive steps. This is the core of my research and what are the issues that we need to address if we are achieving to work. I have identified certain specific issues, the necessity of institutional renewal. There we need to identify the unit of local government and suggesting a smaller unit need to be introduced rather than Pradeshia Sabhas. There we can easily promote the citizen participation at least an informal level. And the bottom-up approach of decentralization is better instead of top-bottom approach. And the changing role of the local government beyond the tradition, there we need to redefine the powers and functions under the local government legislation. The principle of subsidiarity among these three levels of institutions, the central government, provincial councils, and the local government institutions. So then we can avoid the conflicting powers and functions among these three institutions, and we can assure the autonomy of local government institutions. And we need to introduce certain constitutional and legislative amendments, which including incorporate a separate chapter to the constitution while recognizing local government as a third tier of government, and specific provisions for women, the representation and indigenous people, and amendment government institution. Let me briefly introduce the institutionalizing participatory mechanisms at institutional level. As I have suggested earlier, it is better to introduce a smaller unit rather than Pradeshia Sabha in order to promote citizen participation at the grassroots level. And if we can provide a legal space for obtaining the contribution of informal associations such as NGOs, it would be a great attempt in this regard. If I conclude the findings of my research, the representative decision-making process at the local level within its traditional setting and institutional framework suggested for accommodating citizens to involve with it. Secondly, the existing literature provides evidence for the need to search for a suitable approach for institutionalizing citizen participation and participatory democracy builds a foundation for providing legal policy and institutional framework. When it comes to the Sri Lankan context and my topic, how we need to promote this kind of modern existing constitutional framework, the social contract theory has been integrated by the Constitution of Sri Lanka and it is articulated as people's sovereignty. Therefore, through a decentralization mechanism, the power can be enjoyed by the citizens either by themselves or by their representatives. Therefore, the very unrepresentative democratic approach is not contradictory with the existing constitutional setting. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much. I don't know whether I exceed the time. Thank you very much for your opportunity.
Thank you, Deyanjani. I will now open the floor for questions. There are
your presentation was very interesting. However, now we have two systems at the local government level. On the one hand, we have local government institutions, and also since 1987, under the 13th Amendment, we have devolved power on provincial councils that were established under the 13th Amendment. So has it not improved the situation? I mean, are the people not happy than before now? Haven't they got more opportunities to participate in the administration? Now, for example, local government system is, as you correctly said, decentralization of administration. They did not have much power. But now, under the 13th Amendment, the provincial councils have more powers than the local government institutions. So doesn't it provide them with more opportunities now?
Yes, may I answer your question, sir?
Yes, please.
Yes, actually, what I said so, basically I focused about the powers and functions of local government system. If we are looking at these three levels of government, yes, that's true. The provincial councils provide better opportunities for people for engaging the decision-making process. But I am in my view that there is a very complex situation in between. I mean that the distribution of powers and functions among these three levels of government. For example, the certain powers have assigned or certain powers are given to the local government institute. But the local government institution cannot self-enjoy those powers. For example, the 1992, the Divisional Secretariat Act was introduced. Therefore, under this act, the central government is also enjoying certain powers and functions assigned to the local government institution. So therefore, this dual dominance can be seen according to my point of view. With now, the central government also can interfere with regard to the powers and functions of the local government. Councils are also interfering with regard to their powers and functions. So that's why I have mentioned this point specifically. I feel there's a dual dominance towards local government institution. That's why I suggest the principles of subsidiarity need to be introduced. If we can introduce that principle, then this complexity of distributing powers and functions, we can resolve it. Then the local government institution can enjoy their powers with a more autonomy.
Thank you, Dianthony, for your reply. I think that comes to an end of the speakers. I think it is now my duty to sort of wrap up with what was discussed in the four papers presented. We started with a paper on national security and freedom of expression in Sri Lanka, where the author identified international law through the UDHR and ICCPR and compared it with the Sri Lankan laws in the Constitution, Article 14(1)(a), which is restricted to citizens. It's a citizens' right, and along with Article 15, which forms restrictions to the freedom of expression. And as it was pointed out that freedom of expression is not only the right to speak, but publication and also even the right to vote through judicial interpretation has become part of freedom of expression. Then on another note, we had the second speaker speaking on regulating food advertisement, the way forward. Of course, here, contrary to the first speaker, the second speaker was of the view that because of child obesity, that in advertisement, which also could be considered as part of freedom of expression, there should be curtailment of the right of the advertiser in the interest of the children to stop them getting used to or wanting to use unhealthy food. So looking at Article 15(7) of the Constitution, one sees that not only national security is a ground to curtail freedom of expression, but protection of public health is also one of the grounds in 15(7), where restrictions can be placed with regard to the freedom of expression. The third speaker was on a subject on tax, which It was a comparison between India and Sri Lanka, the taxation methods, and recommending that there be a people-friendly tax scheme, and the emphasis on the word income under the current laws of income tax. And finally, we had paper presented on conceptualizing local governance and in the context of citizen participation, where the speaker was of the view that